So, obviously, Patrick and Danielle are incredible, and I just want to give you a little bit of a background. Some of you will know them well and know their background, know their story, know all that they've contributed. But if you don't, I want to give you a little bit of a bio. So, Danielle is a spiritual leader. She's a justice advocate. She's a communicator and a peacemaker. I mean, how incredible. She's written 6 books. And most recently, the most recent one is Better Together. Danielle has established justice departments and church plants that have launched global anti-trafficking initiatives and has created new initiatives to mobilise people towards transformational living. As well as all of that, Danielle is married to Steve and has 3 children, and she's based in Canada. And many of you will know Patrick, and he doesn't need an introduction because he's amazing, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Patrick is Kintsugi Hope's CEO, and he is also the co-founder. He led urban youth work charity XLP, which had justice at the heart of it. He founded that in 1996, and he ran that for 22 years before transferring over to Kintsugi Hope. Patrick has travelled over to 40 countries working with and on behalf of the poorest communities. And he's a regular contributor to radio and TV, and he's an advocate for justice in communities. He's also the author of 6 books. Who's going to be the first to write the 7th, I wonder? And he is also married to Diane and has 4 children. So amazing, both of you. So how did you guys get to know each other? Can you remember?
Go on,
Gosh,
Danielle.
Patrick, I was waiting for you. I'm so old, it's hard for me to remember anything.
I think it was it must have been at Soul Survivor many moons ago, and very long time ago actually. It must have been at Soul Survivor, and then Spring Harvest, and then some of the other ones as well. But I think Soul Survivor was the first time.
We're like festival friends.
Yeah, festival buddy.
Festival groupies.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Amazing. So I'm going to go like hard and fast into the first question, if that's okay. Let's not waste any time. So thinking about the phrase activism, you both have been in the game of justice, in working with communities on behalf of communities to challenge stigma and shame of those justice issues that face our communities every day. But when you're in that game for so long, how do you keep going? What is your motivation? What gets you up every morning despite there always being justice issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have a practice of really trying to put Jesus at the center of my life. And I've always said this for a long time, that the way of life that Jesus leads me in just goes to justice. Like I didn't mean to go there. I didn't set out, I'm going to be a justice person. I literally have just been trying to follow Christ. I've been trying to follow Jesus and the ways of Jesus. And so I have this practice every day, a prayer that I pray that is a prayer of surrender, and it's a prayer of generosity. I do it with my body. I pray this prayer, and it's a prayer that I open my life to others. And that kind of those 3 postures, just sort of surrendered to purposes larger than me, my burdens over to someone bigger than me. And then generosity, where I receive freely and give freely. I try to keep my hands open in a closed-fisted culture. That itself is a radical act, just to resist the clench, even of good things. There's such a temptation just to close in and hang on and clench what really belongs to God. And then to open my life to others, a posture of mission. And so I think like when I wake up in the day, that's kind of what I'm aiming to live. And so I don't really give it much thought beyond today. I'd like to live like this. And it seems like when I decide to live that way daily, I end up doing things that maybe matter to other people, hopefully.
What about you, Patrick?
Yeah, I was really inspired by a guy, Henry Nouwen, a Catholic priest, and I remember he said this. I found it really challenging actually. He said that so often he used to think of life as a big wagon wheel, and what we do is we run around as fast as we can trying to get everything done. And he said, particularly evangelicals, you're mad. You just want to go around all the time. And then he said he came to a point where he realized that actually the secret to a wheel is the middle, is the hub. And he was like, I feel like we need to live in the hub, and the hub is Christ, and see things, and that leads to everything else. And I remember once I was doing a little talk on, where do you naturally hear God and connect with God, and I was doing it to a bunch of students, and all my students were going, up a mountain or in a field or in nature and stuff like that. And then one of my students went, on the London Underground. And I was like, that is, it's not the nicest place, particularly in the summer. It's smelly and And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I just sit there and I look at all the different faces, all the different cultures, all the different ages, all the different ethnicities. And I know the image of God's in every single one of them. And I start seeing the image of God in people, and I'm there to call the image of God out. And I was just so challenged, because sometimes we have, don't we? We divide our life into like this, the sacred and the secular, and here's all my activity. And I think Henry Nouwen said, his whole thing was like, he talked about solitude, the fact that actually you can't get love in the same way from anyone else apart from God. And when you start looking for it in other places, it never works. But solitude always leads to community, and community is actually a way of living. It's not just something where we, our physical, where we live. It's a way of doing stuff. And then thirdly, it's ministry. And he said, actually, I love this about him. He said that ministry was allowing others to experience God in their pain. And I think all the work that I've done, I've been like, God, how can you? I can't do it. We're not the rescuer, right? We're not the savior. We can't do anything. It's that sense of coming alongside and trying to reflect Jesus, but staying in the hub is something I'm trying to do and failing a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. So obviously there's been people throughout history that have fought for justice, but maybe haven't necessarily had a relationship with Jesus or wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as Christians. So what would you say the key difference is when obviously those people have done incredible things, and maybe they're people who've actually got another faith, a faith in a different God or a different religion. So what do you think is so unique about the fact that you would obviously describe yourselves as Christians, and that is the thing that motivates you? What's different about that from other faiths?
That's an interesting question. In one way, I don't know.
That's
In
okay.
another way, I think that there are things that transcend, what we understand. Like I think truth, like a universal truth, or even just telling the truth, sort of is like truth transcends boundaries that we put on it.
Yeah.
Love, love transcends boundaries. I think one of the things I've been contemplating a lot recently is this Philippians passage where it says, we've read forever. I talked to a professor about this the other day, Daryl Johnson, who's a professor of biblical studies at Regent College in Vancouver, Canada. And he said he read his whole life in Philippians, that the verse that says, although Jesus was God, he did not consider himself or did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but instead let go of his life and became a servant, even becoming a human. It's that power of the incarnation. And there's an act in that called kenosis. That's the Greek word for this idea of the emptying, self-giving love, right? Just this like refusing to kind of be so important that you can't give of yourself. And Jesus is the opposite of that. And he said that he believed forever, he always read that although Jesus was God, as though it was sort of a fight between him. Like he was like, even though I'm God, I'm going to still do this. Even though I'm God, I'm going to still like, then there was this kind of like wrestle within him. But he said when he learned to read Greek for himself, he reread that passage of scripture. And it actually says, because Jesus was God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped because he was God.
Wow.
And I was thinking, he said, that changed everything for him because he realized that inherent in the very nature of God is this self-giving love. And whenever you see that at work, so whenever you see self-giving love, even if it doesn't look like what you want it to look like, whenever you tell somebody, whenever you see someone risking themselves for somebody else, whenever you see somebody standing up for the oppressed, whenever you see somebody serving, you can feel it's like witnessing the birth of a baby. You can feel something sacred happening. You can feel something divine at work. So I would say that like I have a lot of boxes about like what it means to be a follower of Jesus from like my evangelical upbringing or whatever, but I would say this for sure. God lives outside of those boxes. And there's something about justice, that when we touch it, when we sense it, when we feel something sacred, we feel something divine. Now, whether or not people know when they do justice that they're connecting with God, or whether they would use the same words I would use about how that connection works, I can't control that. And definitely we all have different ways, but is there something divine, something sacred, something other than what is normal, what is natural, what is sort of a worldly system of like the survival of the fittest, right? Like I think people are touching that. And I actually think that's what makes justice so remarkably beautiful. And I think that actually might even be why a lot of the activists that might not call themselves Christians are attracted to the work, is that there's something they're involved in that is bigger than themselves, something supernatural that's happening. They can't maybe even describe it, but they're touching what I would say is the divine, is the very nature of God.
That's great. That's brilliant. So how would you both describe the difference between charity and justice? Because they're obviously different things, and is the motivation behind them slightly different?
Yeah, I think I was really challenged years ago. I read a book called Toxic Charity. I think it's called
Mm, yeah.
Churches and charities hurt those that they try to serve sometimes. And what it was saying really is it's saying that any charity that isn't based on long-term relationship building has the potential to do more harm than good. And it was looking at things like Haiti, the earthquake, and that we sent so many clothes over to Haiti. We did a great job, but we nearly put Haiti's clothing business out of business.
Mm.
And instead of working with those on the ground and trying to think about, and I think sometimes charity comes from a good place, don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes we need to be careful we don't use it as a tick box exercise. I've done my bit for charity, I've downloaded my single. That actually is a lot bigger than that. And I think biblically, when you look at actually justice, it often is always in relationship with mercy, and that mercy and justice often go together. And I know from working with really damaged young people over the years, I could work with people who are either in a gang or the edge of a gang, both here or in LA or in Jamaica. And I can befriend them, I can take them to football, their grades will start going up. But you know what? That actually, when their addiction's taken hold of their life, or if they're starting to sell their bodies because they need to pay for money for their kids, is actually there's a justice issue. And so I think the combination of mercy and justice is so important. And that old saying, I think Lipton uses it in the book, the old saying where feed a man a fish and he'll eat for the day, teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. It's conventional wisdom, but what happens if the lake's polluted? What happens if there's no fish left? What do we do then? Well, maybe we need to just think about this really differently. Maybe we need to issue, fishing licenses and wildlife management. Maybe we need to have a bigger view of what justice is all about. And see, teaching the man to fish is a very individual thing, whereas controlling the lake and letting it flourish, that's a community issue. And so I always feel that justice and mercy go together, and in the way that we need to sort of live that out, and both are incredibly important. I mean, I love the quote, "Justice is what love looks like in public," and I think that is probably the most beautiful way that you can describe justice for me.
That's Dr. Cornel West. I think if you're looking for a source there, it's great image. When you asked the question, Jess, I had immediately sort of meeting needs that are presenting. So meeting presenting needs is often a charitable response, which is why it's so big, because there's like presenting need, right? So, and then I would say justice is asking questions about root issues.
Yeah.
And that indigenous parable, of we keep pulling these bodies out of the river, but will someone go upstream to find out why they're falling in? That really, I think, helps us know the difference between and the connection between mercy and justice.
And neither one is wrong or
Right.
better than the other. It's just that the thing behind it is slightly different.
Well, I think one without the other might be off course.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the great problems. So I was part of the Salvation Army for years, working in a very impoverished community in Canada called the Downtown East Side. And I remember the public relation campaign was always how many people they fed a day. But the real issue, when you were asking real questions about why are you feeding this many people a day, you realized there was substandard housing that didn't have kitchens. So nobody could actually, there were no grocery stores anywhere.
Okay.
There was no way to, so my question, even to the organization, was maybe you should stop promoting your charitable work and start asking some different questions to change the nature of this community. And wouldn't it be a better win if we fed less people because they could eat for themselves, So asking some of those questions. So I think you could have a lot, and don't get me wrong, the charitable efforts in that neighborhood by the Salvation Army were remarkable. They were beautiful. And I think they were motivated well. But without those deeper questions about root issues that are causing the presenting need, you could actually do even more harm. And you can continue to allow neighborhoods and communities to stay oppressed. And that would be terrible. So I think without justice, mercy can easily go off course.
So I guess that's what makes knowing like a vision really important, because I guess a vision is your why, and it goes beyond the how, and so I guess, yeah, would you say that like as individuals we can have a vision as well? Because I guess we often associate vision with like a church's vision or a charity's vision or a movement's vision, but do you think you can have a vision for your own life and then use that as a motivation for your justice passions and your own individual life?
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's often said that vision is the art seeing the invisible that produces passion and energy in people. And it's crucial. It's crucial for leaders, but it's crucial for everyone. I think Jim Wallace says, Martin Luther King never stood up and went, I've got a complaint to make, or look at my 5-year business plan. It's really exciting. He said, I've got a dream. And actually, his speech wasn't going very well. And it was actually someone in the crowd who shouted out to Martin Luther King, tell us what the dream is. What's the dream? What's the passion? And I know that as me and Diane, I remember years ago we used to sit down and we sort of wrote a mission statement as a family, like a vision statement of what are we actually all about, what do we long to see, and I think it is so important. And it was really interesting just thinking of putting that in the context about bringing about change. I remember we were really concerned about one of the things in our community was the amount of girls that are involved in gang culture. And a lot of the girls, there's lots of records for the guys, but no records for the girls. And every guy in a gang can have literally 2 or 3 different ladies on the go at the same time. And there's often abuse, there's often a misuse of power, and it's very dark place. And I was really concerned, what can we do about this issue? And this became a real live issue. This was my community. I found it really hard to deal with. And so I remember getting this meeting together, and we got in the council, we got clinical psychologists, we got doctors, we got Sapphire, which is the department in the police that deal with sexual violence. We got Trilogy, which is the department in the police that deal with how to reach the hardest to reach young people. And then afterwards, it was a little bit tense because I think they were thinking, what the Christian guys got to offer here and why are we here? And then one of them went, well, you're the only ones that actually can reach the invisible people. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And the GP said, well, until they come into my surgery, I can't do anything. Until I get a referral from the clinical psychologist, I'm powerless. And then the police were like, yeah, until they commit an offence, we do nothing. And I was like, oh my goodness. So what we do is we wait until we're in this desperate situation where tragedies often happen, when someone's been stabbed or raped or killed or abused, and then all these services wrap around this person. And then, to be honest, the young person and the family don't access the services because they're suspicious of them because there's no trust. So then they said this, and I found this one of the most fascinating conversations, because remember, this is not a Christian meeting at all. They went, there's 3 things that you guys need to know if you're going to bring about change. And they said, number 1 is you've got to build trust, because you see, no one trusts anyone anymore. We don't trust the church. We don't trust the media. We don't trust, ask the average young person in London what they think of the police. I've got good friends who are police officers, but there's this missense of trust. We don't trust. And then they said, so you've got to build trust. And then they were like, but then you've got to build a belief that change is possible. Because if you don't live without hope, you will embrace things that will destroy you. And a lot of young people, they're living without hope, and there's always a backstory, right? No kid's born angry. Something's happened and they've lost that hope and they feel trapped. And then thirdly, they went, you've got to let them see that they need to change their attitude and their behavior. So we're sort of sitting there thinking, so what you're telling me is trust, belief, change is the key to transformation. I was like, I've heard that somewhere before. and I, as a family, and we had a lot of people on our doorstep who were getting knife crime and all that sort of stuff, but we were like, we want to be peacemakers in this community. It wasn't just about XLP, it just wasn't about the charity thing. This was our community, and these young girls were suffering in our community, and now we haven't seen hundreds, but we've seen some people make courageous lifestyle stories, and it's all because they started to trust someone, and then they started to believe that they were valuable, and then they started to change their attitude and behavior. And so I do believe that is part of where we're at. A vision for your community is so important.
I'm muted. I'm not muted anymore. They have a question here which kind of links really nicely with that, which is links to, if you decide a vision for your own life and it incorporates quite a large change and you need to kind of do a bit of a how do you bring people with you? Because if you're suddenly making a super radical change, then how do you bring people with you on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I put in the chat there just a way of life that I live. It's an open order. So it's a way that I order my life. And with my own personal mission statement, just being, I want my life to look like love. Mm-hmm. And which is what Jesus said was the only life that could really properly honor him. And then, so I pretty much ask myself a question, like, what does love look like on a regular basis? And on a daily basis, and practice things that I pray would help my life look loving. And so I think for me, the best, I mean, I don't know, think about what's motivated you. Like, what has caused the most motivation in you to change your life? So I don't know about you, but like, I could watch a lot of videos on dieting instructors tell me that I could lose weight. None of it really has led to me losing weight. So obviously it's not a knowledge problem, right? It's obviously not a knowledge problem. So what is it exactly? I think change actually occurs, the transformations or the metamorphosis actually occurs in this word metanoia. It's the Bible word for this is repent. But in repent, so we'll hear that a lot. When I hear it, I don't know what you hear, but when I hear it, I think of angry Christians telling people they should like stop having fun or something like that. But repentance is from this Greek word name called metanoia. And metanoia is to change the way you see and to change the way you think. It's like an aha moment. It's like, not only have you're not like motivated by shame. It's not guilt motivating you. It's like this revelation of like, oh, I see it now. Like I can see things I never saw before now. Everything kind of becomes reframed. And then as a result of that metanoia, there's this transformation that I'm part of, because I've changed everything, not out of a desire to change everything, but out of a desire to walk into this new revelation that I've now had. And I think that idea of like the transformational power, you know, like when that one of my favorite conversations is in John 3 with Nicodemus, where this religious leader is going to Jesus, like, how are you doing this?
Mm.
That's what he's saying. Like, how are you living this way? How are you not afraid of religious leaders? How are you not concerned with rank or privilege? Like, how are you free to speak so free? Like he's asking, and John, even how are you casting demons out of people? How are you healing people? Like Nicodemus is attracted to the way Jesus is living. And it's Jesus's life that then becomes this attraction to Nicodemus. And Jesus says, oh, you don't even know this? How you do this is to become born again. That's that transformation. That's that metanoia. That's that there's a whole different way to live. Now, John, he doesn't really get it fully until after Jesus dies. And then after Jesus dies, we get a hold of Nicodemus again when he comes with 7 pounds of spices to come and anoint Jesus's body, you know, publicly associating. Now we start to see him free. Now we start to see him not afraid. Now we start to see him departing from religious establishment. Now we start to see him and like looking more like Jesus, acting more like Jesus, being liberated. You can see like he's had this like metanoia now, whereas before he was stupefied. And probably even if he like, you know, tried to shame himself into following Jesus, he just couldn't do it. I don't think that guilt, shame, fear have much motivation power.
No.
I think what is motivating is to see differently and to see in someone the kind of thing that you want for yourself. When you see in somebody else the kind of thing that you long for, the something that you long for, there's something in you that begins to open your mind that it's possible, that you're invited, that wants, that actually starts this desire in you to be part of living that way. So I always say to people, like, first your own metanoia, like get that paradigm shift, get that revelation that you need to see yourself living differently and a power greater than yourself to help you do it. And then the best thing you can do is not tell other people what they should or shouldn't do. You should just show them. You should just show them by how you live. And I guarantee you, if you live out a real metanoia, a real different way of living than the way other people live, that the way a dominant culture lives, people will go, hey, what's going on over there? Tell me more.
That's really great. That's really great. So I know, kind of switching gears a little bit. I know that a topic that both of you are passionate about is justice within the church, and kind of making sure that historically that kind of abuse of power has, I guess, that pattern doesn't necessarily continue. I guess a lot of us may have experienced that during our time, or witnessed it at least. I know saw you did a video the other day, Danielle, about this, about speaking about when leaders necessarily use their position to get one up on people and use that as a position to kind of make people feel like they know less. How do we begin to unravel the history of abuse of power, particularly within the church, I guess, but also more broadly within other spheres of leadership, within the business sector and probably everywhere? How do we start to unravel that from your perspectives?
Well, wow. I think for me, I haven't been trying to unravel it. I think the Lord's been helping. So I think part of me's like, I don't know if we're ready. Like,
Okay.
But God's like, whoa, no, I'm unraveling. So I feel like we're in a season where things are being unraveled. I don't even think that it's a choice. I think the choice in these days is to actually whether or not you're going to prevent it. I think the unraveling has begun. So maybe that's just where I'm at, where the unraveling has begun. And I think our impulse, a knee-jerk reaction of ours, is to go, whoa, hey, this is chaotic. This is confusing. This cannot be God. And actually, chaos is always the place where God begins to create beautiful things. So I'm always like, don't be afraid of the chaos. Chaos always preempts beauty and new creation. And I'm so glad that you used the word unravel, because one of my favorite job descriptions of Jesus in the scripture is that Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil. I always find it to be such a cool, like I want it on my business card. What do you do? Oh, I destroy the works of the devil. What do you do? And, but the word destroy there actually means unravel. That's what it means. And I love that idea of Jesus came to unravel. When you think about oppression, injustice, when you think about sin, what it does is it ravels itself, it chokes, holds, it wraps itself around us so that what is actually true and good about humanity, about our own lives, about our organizations, about our callings and visions, it's been all wrapped up in these terrible things. And Jesus has come quite literally to unwrap all the oppression so that what is true and good and sacred and pure could be seen. And I love that idea too, because then it's not like just throwing everything out. I'm not like, my temptation is to be like, oh, wow, that is such a wrapped up ball of gobbledygook that I don't even want any part of it. But Jesus is no, at the center of that guck, even of our lives, is something sacred and beautiful and good and worth fighting for. And so that unraveling begins. And I think all we have to do is keep saying yes to the light. Keep saying yes to the light. We are children of the light. Keep saying yes to the light, because the light will expose all of the things that need to be unraveled. The light will illuminate all of the things that are worthy to fight for and to contend for. So I think one of the ways, at least one of the ways I've been participating in the unraveling of darkness and oppression, specifically around power abuse in churches, and I would say even more specifically around sexual abuse in churches, which is just so grievous to the heart of the gospel and to the purposes of God. One of the ways I've participated in that is just by simply saying yes to the light. I'm going to live here, and I am not going to live in the dark. I'm not going to want the dark. And this is a great fight within us, because it is so much easier to cover up those things that feel out of control and chaotic. So in my life, I'm just wrestling with my own impulse, but just to keep saying yes to God's light, yes to truth, yes to standing in that place. I feel like that's the best way for me.
That's great. I think I've struggled with that recently, like coming out of COVID. Wasn't going to church necessarily like all the time during COVID because we were doing online church, and then almost have really struggled to get back into it, because during those 2 years of being absent from Sunday mornings, it was almost like I had this huge perspective, almost like a bird's eye view, and I was like, what? I'd got really confused looking back and being like, actually, there was loads of things that I started to notice that were really a bit confusing because I had that perspective change. And actually, Danielle, what you said about almost throwing it all out, that is kind of what I've done. I've kind of just gone, oh, I don't want anything to do with it, or I'm really struggling with the whole concept, that actually looking for the center, the nucleus of what is really good and pure. I love that concept. I'm sorry if we're having some strange noises in the background. Anyone else hear that?
Yeah, I think that is.
Very strange. I'm just gonna see.
Probably my fault for using the word chaos.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just gonna see if I can. Oh, there we go. I don't know what that was. Okay. We'll continue, I guess. Sorry, everybody, for that little disturbance. So we have a question here, which is kind of about how can we work with those that need kind of intervention. We've had a couple of questions about this. Need intervention, but when help is offered, when I guess, yeah, when a reaching out is offered, it's been pushed away. And whether that's through family or friends offering that help, or whether that's through charities that are assisting with the issue, how can we tackle with that? Because that must be so frustrating when help is being offered, but actually it's not wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to keep going. To be honest, I've got no clever answer. That I think love is showing up day after day and slogging it out. And I remember when I started doing this stuff, someone said to me, a friend said to me, like, vision and frustration is the same thing. It's just spelt differently. And I mean, I've lost count. I think so often, probably we're guilty of always communicating the show reel at a lot of these conferences. But there are, for every young person I worked with, for every amazing kintsugi story there are heartbreaking ones as well, of people that don't make it, who don't come through. But I just think we've got to keep going. We've got to, in kintsugi we often talk about being a gentle presence in people's lives, and I think what we mean by that is we don't always have to be the expert. Because our thing is obviously around mental and emotional health, and sometimes you think to engage in that world, you've got to be the expert, right? And
Mm.
you've got to know everything about it. But actually, I think sometimes actually being a gentle presence means that I can take my friend to the doctor. I can do that act of love and kindness, and keep showing up and keep being consistent.
Mm.
And in the end, I think relationship is always the key. Relationship nurtures the belief that change is possible. Jesus committed himself to relationship, and I think that's what we got to keep doing. And our structures, we put so much focus on events and come to this and come to that. I wish we put so much more focus on relationship, and I think that is really key. And I think the church has a role to play here. I think the church, I actually think the church has got a really important role to play in seeing transformation happen.
Mm. Mm.
Jess, can I just add something here?
Sure.
I've been rethinking through the creative power of being human. And God created humanity with the capacity to choose. And there is something so profoundly good about recognizing people's choices. And I think sometimes it's so tempting to come in as people who might think they know better, or who might think this is a good choice, this is a bad choice, whatever the capacity is. We come in a world where we have more than
Mm.
some people have less. So we're already in a weird power dynamic. But one thing I've been recaptured with Jesus and the way he related to people is every time Jesus related to anybody in need, he asked them what they wanted. Every time. I mean, it's absolutely actually almost ridiculous. Like, there's a blind guy who's crying out all day, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus, finally, they call him to him. And Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? I'm like, look, I'm not even the savior of the world, and I already know what that guy needs. But Jesus refuses to give the man what he needs without the man asking for what he wants. And there's something, and you'll see this with Jesus, the only person who possesses people is the devil. Jesus only partners with people.
Mm.
He will not possess people, because humans were created with the capacity to choose. So much of the unraveling, much of the work is getting that person to choose life, to choose truth, to choose beauty, to choose grace. And so, like Patrick said, if all I can do is be in a relationship where I just keep emphasizing that that person has the right to, the ability to choose for themselves what it is that they want to do, that itself is sacred work. So even when someone doesn't choose well, I still celebrate the fact that they use their choice.
Mm.
I still celebrate the fact that they use their choice. And then whenever somebody does choose well, I mean, I celebrate, like, even if it's a tiny little thing, but just the fact that they're exercising their choice in a way that's bringing life, or a way that's bringing goodness to the world, I just celebrate like crazy. And once I started to see that in the way that Jesus interacted with people, even people who he knew better, he knew better what they needed, what they wanted, what they should have even asked for. He refuses to give them anything that they don't choose. This is true of discipleship. And then this also has really helped me, even as people of church people or charity people or people who work in justice, how much restraint is necessary for me to just take away the choice.
Mm.
Right? Because all I want to do is be like, nope, you will not choose that. You will choose this, and I'm going to help you. And I'm going to force you. I'm going to make it pretty clear that this is the only choice that I'm going to allow you to take. And I've really, really done a lot of work on this even recently in terms of power abuse, is recognizing that God's power will never take over. God's power always comes under. God's power always liberates people to make their own choices for themselves. God will not choose for you. And that is infuriating on so many levels. I mean, I've walked with enough addicts to know I wish God would possess people because heroin will, right? Heroin will, and the devil will, but God will not. And that's because there is a sacred, beautiful thing created for humanity to discover, and it's their ability to choose.
Wow. Thank you both. Um, I don't feel like we could do. Oh, sorry, were you going to say
No,
something?
no, I mean, just to labour the point, really, that
Mm.
love is never about control, and
Mhm.
I think that is like the crux of it, really. And I think that it's about freedom and it's about release, and I totally 100% agree with what Danielle's saying. And I think that actually part of what we're seeing in the church is actually that we need a change of culture. So if you define culture as the way we do things around here, I'm reading some of the things and I'm going, oh my goodness, that's awful. But that is some really poor Christian culture that's been around for a long time. And in terms of the way that, you talk to most church leaders, they're tired, they're stressed, they're working crazy hours, and the culture's never sustainable. And I feel like we need to have a real think about what sort of culture do we want to create, and to create healthy cultures where people flourish and grow and succeed, which is not built on manipulation, power, or control, but built on love, justice, and freedom. And I think if we can grapple with that conversation, is what are the cultures that we need to develop, because then people will start to thrive. And you can never take away someone's choice. As heartbreaking it is always their choice. And I think that's really important.
Mm. So I guess to ask the question, what types of cultures do we need to build then if we're gonna see places of love and freedom and trust? What does that look like within the church, but also more broadly? Like, I'm aware that lots of people here, maybe they don't work for the church, but maybe they have jobs in the workplace, in the cities, in their communities. What does that practically look like to build those, yeah, to build relationships, to build communities of love, justice, and freedom?
I think the key is actually, and something I find really hard is loving without an agenda. I feel like sometimes we love, but as long as you love me back a little bit, because we're all a little bit insecure, right? And we want people to like us, we want people to love us, and I think loving without an agenda is absolutely crucial. And I think also, I think what people are longing for, to borrow Brené Brown, uh, who's talked a lot about this, is a real sense of authenticity and vulnerability. And I think sometimes as Christians, we think that, we've got to have the answers. And actually, that I've discovered, got the kintsugi bowl behind me, that in sharing our brokenness actually is really powerful. And there's a real sense of, when I was in a time of dark depression and going, God, I just don't get it anymore, instead of actually being ashamed of that and keeping that in the darkness, actually sort of starting sharing that, and then actually going, but I still love Jesus. And I think that's powerful. And I think people are just longing, a bit of fed up with the show. They're just longing for authenticity. And I think that comes out in the Psalms, doesn't it? That almost at this time where people are still grieving and people have been through so much, and there's a time of lament, there's a time of grieving well. And I don't think grief is some magic process that you go through. I think it's a constant thing that's with you. And I feel like we need to help people in that process. But I think it's really important. So courage, vulnerability, authenticity, I think are what people are craving for at the moment, and they are craving for connection as well. It's interesting. I'm reading this book called The Lonely Century. Oh my goodness, the stats on loneliness. The fact that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The fact that I think it's in the US, there are 620,000 people you can hire to be your friend for the day, and people do. We have designed estates in London to actually make sure we're not looking at each other's gardens, we're keeping each other's out. All our public spaces are gone, our libraries are gone, our youth clubs are gone. And actually, people really do need that sense of connection. But I think actually, in the way that Brené Brown says, it's people want to belong, but they don't want to fit in. And I think if we can create that sense of belonging, and that's what Jesus did with the disciples, don't think those guys agreed on everything. We have learned not to. It's almost coming out of lockdown. It feels like what's happened is in lockdown, you hang out with people who are similar to you, right? You hang out with friends, you've got a family, and then we somehow learned not to coexist with people that have different opinions to us. And I am sure there were all sorts of conversations that were going on in those roads, but they still had that connection. They were still on the same team, and I think people are longing for that at the moment.
Mm. Mm. Do you have anything to add, Danielle?
I think that was pretty good, Patrick. I would say one word that's been helping me a lot is mutuality. And again, it's this getting rid of the power imbalance in relationships. And I think that as Christians, and then this is also going to signal that I'm going to win the race of book writing, because a new book's coming out in August.
Oh, she might.
When's yours coming out, Patrick?
Don't know.
Anyway, it's called The Other Side of Hope. And in it, I talk a little bit about flipping the script about cynicism and despair in a culture. And of course, the remedy to that is genuine human connection. And one of the things I've really been convinced about lately is that we're addicted to what I call the Hercules myth, which is that to be a good human or to be successful in any measure means we're ascending. So we're always getting greater, we're always getting bigger, we're always getting smarter, and we're on this path of ascension. Of course, it doesn't really meet with our real life, which is always like up and down and up and down. And we're just really human like the rest of us, like the rest of everybody. But we're on, especially people who are called the leadership, the leadership addiction myth is this myth of Hercules. And Hercules in the myth is always trying to prove himself worthy to the gods. And how he's proving himself worthy is that he's saying, I'm better than any other human. We're addicted to this myth. We're addicted to this idea that our success comes from us proving we're better than any other human being, which you can see actually creates a competition. It creates sort of this pecking order. It feeds into hierarchy. And then at the end, what it does is it creates, the more you ascend, whether it's a myth or the more you really literally try to keep ascending, the more disconnected you become from humanity, from other humans. Wow. And you see, this is a disease of loneliness, even in very successful people. So the more successful somebody is, the more lonely they are because of this Herculean myth. So what I suggest is get rid of that myth. And actually, what's really interesting in the life of Jesus, we talked about that Philippians thing, but Jesus literally comes in the opposite direction. So Hercules is trying to prove himself worthy of the gods. He wants to go to live with the gods. Jesus doesn't consider proving worthiness anything to be bothered with, because he's already inherently worthy. So he leaves heaven and he descends to human form. And one of the things that is exciting about this, I don't know how I used to think about this, that Jesus was like, oh man, I'm human, like the nuts, I guess I'll have to take one for the team. Someone's got to go down to that gross place called earth and like sort out those terrible people. But Jesus's favorite title to introduce himself, and this is really interesting, is the human one. It's the Son of Man is the title in the Greek, and it literally is translated the human one. So Jesus, although he is God, is not concerned with proving or pleasing anyone, but he's going around literally saying, hi, I'm Jesus. I'm human. I'm human. The very opposite direction of Hercules, where Jesus is celebrating his humanity without shame and without guilt and without fear. Wow. And when he does that, what he does, and the reason he does this is not to prove anything or to please anyone, but it is to connect with us. It is to connect with us. So connection is obviously his highest aim. So what if instead of trying to prove or trying to please, we actually started connecting? Wow. And the way that we do that is through mutuality, which is to say, I have something to receive and I have something to give. And that every relationship I have is mutual. There is a giving and there is a taking, and that all relationships have that component. And if they don't have that component, they're not genuine relationships. They're something else. And this is really challenging if you're a Christian leader who's been taught that your whole job is to give in a relationship and never receive.
Yeah.
And actually, I challenge you, because receiving is the harder work. But not only does Jesus ask people to choose, Jesus asks people for help all the time. And it's genuine. When he's at the well with the Samaritan woman, what does he say? Would you give me a drink? I'm thirsty. What's he doing? Does he, like, he's the sovereign, like he could turn everything into water if he wanted to, but he's asking for what he needs. What's he doing? He's establishing a power imbalance. There's already a power imbalance there, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Jesus is trying his best to actually work that power into a proper balance where there is some exchange that's happening, because he's after genuine connection in human relationships. And that struggle is worth it. And in order to get there, what Patrick was just saying about vulnerability and authenticity and being your true self, all the ways that that happens, when you're happening that, what you're doing is you're tearing down that Hercules myth. You're literally tearing it down. And there's so much cultural power. There's so much cultural buy-in to the Hercules myth, because it's not just the leader that thinks they should be like that. It's everyone else that thinks they should be like that too. So there's so much sort of like counterintuitive weird feelings about being vulnerable and expressing need and telling the boundaries and saying I'm human without it being like a terrible, horrible thing to say, but like a genuine, isn't it great? I'm a human being. I have limitations. I have capacities. I have needs. I have, places where I can receive. It creates a genuine human connection with other people. And our relationship then becomes life-giving to one another. Somehow that is the secret and the answer to all of our deepest longings. And it is one of the hardest things to contend for and to get to, because either we've been convinced that we have nothing to give, right? Which is a denial of our humanity. Everybody has something to contribute, or we've been convinced that we only have something to give and nothing to receive. Either way, we starve ourselves and other people from genuine mutual relationships.
Wow. Thank you both. I wonder how you would answer this. What does it mean to be a peacemaker in today's world, with political scandal and war and justice issues everywhere we look, and the divide between rich and poor seems like it's getting bigger and bigger. How would you define what it means to be a peacemaker today?
Okay, I'm gonna answer this, Patrick, just because I'm gonna time out after this. So I've got a thing I got to do.
That's fine.
Speaking of my human limitations, I want to say that peacemaking is not peacekeeping. Peace is not the absence of conflict; it's the presence. Martin Luther King Jr. said of justice. God said of shalom, right? Which is this right relationship, the fullness of relationships. And we get back to that, Lisa Sharon Harper wrote a book called The Very Good Gospel. And in that book, she broke down the biblical concept of shalom. And it's always just been like resonating in my mind because it's so profound. She said the concept of shalom, which is translated peace, but really it means fullness or wholeness. She said, it's not that every single thing that's been created has been created perfectly. It's that every single thing and the way it relates to every other single thing is created perfectly. So I'm just going to say, it's not that every individual thing is perfect. It's that the way every individual thing relates to every other thing is made perfect or made right. And so you can see how this is like our own ideals of individualized living that is disconnected from the way other people live. So even the way that we celebrate somebody's success, even though it meant, so like Elon Musk is one of the richest people, $44 billion he spends on buying Twitter because he's ticked off. And yet the world is like, people are starving. And so we celebrate this guy as a successful guy, but at the expense of shalom. So I think that making the peace or bringing shalom wherever we go is this idea of saying, where are the broken connections and relationships that I have some capacity to make right? Where are those things missing that would create shalom that I can actually be part of, reconnecting again and making this thing right.
Mm.
And I think, I mean, I don't know. I think if you go to amplifypeace.org, I think there's 7 principles of peacemaking there. That's part of an organization I journey with. But I think that peacemaking, in my, best attempt at ministry of reconciliation, is sort of how Paul put it in Corinthians. Peacemaking is the ministry of reconciliation, but I wouldn't say even just the ministry of reconciliation between one person and another person. I think it's the ministry of reconciliation in terms of the way we do life with the created order, with one another, with relationships, with tribes, with history, right? Like, how do we restore these relationships to be right again? That's the work of making peace. With
And
that, I'm gonna tag out, but I really, really love you
that's
guys.
fine. No, quickly, just
Go
really
well.
quickly,
Yep.
Danielle, someone said, who is the author of Shalom, the book that you were talking about?
The Very Good Gospel by Lisa Sharon Harper.
Thank
The
you.
Very Good Gospel. You got it.
Thanks, Danielle.
Bless
Thanks
you guys.
very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Amazing. Patrick, being as we've still got you here and you have so much to offer, I wonder whether I could come to you with a question which kind of focused on what Danielle was speaking about, which was about actually focusing on connection being that thing that really makes us truly human and brings out the beautiness in being human. So what does connection mean to you, and why do you, I know it's important to you and you speak about it a lot, what does it mean to you, and how can we actually build true connection in our communities?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the connection part is really the heart of what Kintsugi Hope is all about, and I think it's when you go, there's no them and us, there's just us. I think that's the thing, that one person doesn't become the rescue and the other person doesn't become the sort of charity case, and I think that's really important. And I know, to tell you a bit about our story is, through our own period of brokenness, me and Diane, we set up at Kintsugi Hope in really to try and help the church connect with their communities. And so doing this through wellbeing groups, 12-week programs that run in communities, that run in coffee shops, that run in prisons, that run in schools, and looking at issues that we need to talk about, issues around anger and resilience and forgiveness and anxiety, big issues, and allowing people to chat and allowing people to come together and allowing people to share in their common humanity. And I guess so our heart in Kintsugi is, let's train the church to run as many of these groups as possible. The fact of the matter is this, is that as we hit a recession and as we go into harder times, suicide rates do go up, people's mental health does deteriorate. And yet the church is in every community across this country. We will outlast politicians, and we will be there after 3 or 4 years, or the next leadership challenge, or whatever goes on. Actually, change always happens from the grassroots up. Social movements always are the things that really bring tangible change to communities. And so what we're begging for really is more churches to go, you know what, I want to reach out to my community, and I want to do it not through salesmen, but maybe through communicating my brokenness. And so I'd really encourage people to maybe think about running one in their community.
Absolutely. And I think that it's such a practical way to actually bring about that change that we've just been speaking about, because we can speak about, I want to see change, but actually, like, and there's many organizations out there, whatever the justice issue that's on your heart is, I'm sure there's an organization out there that you can partner with that can bring about change. And if social isolation and speaking about mental health and being more honest about our brokenness is on your heart, then we'd love to work with you and partner with you on that. Yeah, that's so great. So it's been amazing. Thank you so much, Patrick, and Danielle. I know she's had to disappear, but it's been so good. There was just a few things that we wanted to tell you about before you disappear, if that's okay. Please do feel free to leave some feedback in the chat. It'd be lovely for us to pass on your thanks and your any feedback that you have. You can now message everybody in the chat, so not just me. So feel free to leave any feedback that you have, or any yeah, any just encouragements for our speakers this evening, because it's been lovely to have you here, and we had so many questions. I'm sorry if we haven't managed to get to them this evening, but if you do want to find out more about Kintsugi Hope, then we'd love to chat with you. We have some amazing events coming up very, very soon. We're on the road in a few weeks' time. Next week we're actually heading off on the 16th of June. Our first place is Newark, and this is for Bouncing Forwards. Oh, and there's a video. Here we go.
I want to be that person that actually accepts what's going on. Let's be real, let's be honest, let's be authentic. I'm fed up with the show. And but let's not lose hope. Let's not lose hope. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, do you hear freedom calling? I was in pieces, covered in silence and concrete. If you go outside tonight and you look down, you'll probably see these grey, lifeless concrete slabs looking at you. If you look a little bit closer, there'll be some grass probably growing through the cracks. And you can bend down and you can pick it up, but you know what? You will not take away its root, and it will keep growing. And eventually it will crack that concrete. And I want to be someone in life that doesn't ignore the grey, the lifeless, the really tough stuff that people go through. Actually, we're called to share in that and go through that together. But I also want to be the person that sees the possibilities of change, that sees the grass growing through the cracks, to say there's got to be a bigger picture.
Amazing. So if we're coming near you, we would love to see you. Please do book in via the website kintsugihope.com/tour. It's an amazing evening, live music, chat show style, looking at resilience, courage and change, more of what we've been chatting about this evening. So we'd love to see you there. We also have 20 spaces in this year's marathon. I can see there's some marathon runners from our run last year. We have 20 spaces this year, and as I'm sure you are aware, 25% of the population is affected by mental health. So if you are interested, please email admin@kintsugihope.com. It's an amazing opportunity. I walked it last year. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling the truth. That's the beauty about this virtual marathon, is that you can walk, you can run, you can dance, you can hop, you can just do it wherever you're based. So if you're based in Northern Ireland, if you're based in the Scottish Islands, if you're based in Portsmouth or Cornwall, you can do it wherever you are. You don't need to travel into London, but you get a London Marathon medal, and you get a fancy t-shirt as well, and all while raising awareness and support and hopefully some funds for Kintsugi Hope, so that we can carry on creating safe and supportive spaces. Last year it was just so lovely because we had 25 runners and walkers all over the UK, and we had a WhatsApp group and we were cheering each other on. So it's on the 3rd of October this year, and we would love it if you're interested. I am super unfit. I got seriously out of breath walking up the stairs the other day with a heavy box. Patrick was laughing at me, and so if I can do it, you 100% can, and I would definitely recommend it. Such a feeling of I was just very proud of myself afterwards, all while raising money for a fantastic cause. So if you are interested, get in touch. You can find information on the website as well. So yeah, I think that's where we leave you tonight. So please do use the chat to leave your feedback. It'd be lovely to hear how you found this evening. We'd just love to hear, and any questions that you have still, maybe we will cover them in a later event online maybe. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a lovely rest of your evening.